Hi, boys and girls. Miss Mora here. I'm here to read our second chapter in our chapter book, Frindle. I hope you enjoyed the first chapter, and I'm going to get started reading the second chapter for you. So here we go. The second chapter is called Miss Granger. Fifth grade was different. That was a year to get ready for middle school. Fifth grade meant passing classes. It meant no morning recess. It meant real letter grades. And it meant Mrs. Granger. There were about 150 kids in fifth grade, and there were 7 fifth grade teachers: 2 math, 2 science, 2 social studies, but only 1 language arts teacher. In language arts, Mrs. Granger had monopoly and a reputation. Mrs. Granger lived alone in a tidy little house in the older part of town. She drove an old pale blue car to school every morning, rain or shine, snow or sleet, hail or wind. She had a perfect attendance record that stretched back farther than anybody could remember. Her hair was almost white, swept away from her face and up into something like a nest at the back of her head. Unlike most of the young women teachers, she never wore pants to school. She had 2 skirt and jacket outfits, her gray uniform and her blue uniform, which she always wore over a white shirt with a little cameo pin at the neck. And Mrs. Granger was one of those people who never sweats. It had to be over 90 degrees before she even took off her jacket. She was small as teachers go. There were some fifth graders who were taller than her, but Mrs. Granger seemed like a giant. It was her eyes that did it. They were dark and gray, and if she turned them on full power, they would make you seem like a speck of dust. Her eyes could twinkle and laugh too, and kids said that she could crack really funny jokes, but it wasn't the jokes that made her famous. Everyone was sure that Mrs. Granger had X-ray vision. Don't even think about chewing a piece of gum within 50 feet of her. If you did, Mrs. Granger would see you and catch you and stick that piece of gum onto a bright yellow index card. Then she would safety pin the card right to the front of your shirt. And you'd have to wear it for the rest of the school day. After that, you'd have to take it home and have your mom or dad sign the card and bring it back to Mrs. Granger the next day. And it didn't matter to Mrs. Granger if you weren't in 5th grade, because the way she saw it, sooner or later, you would be. All the kids at Lincoln Elementary School knew that at the end of the line was 5th grade, and Mrs. Granger would be grading their spelling tests and their reading tests, and worst of all, their vocabulary tests. Week after week, month after month. Every language arts teacher in the world enjoys making kids use the dictionary. Check your spelling, check your definition, check those syllable breaks. But Mrs. Granger didn't just enjoy the dictionary, she loved it. Almost worshipped it. Her weekly vocabulary list was 35 words long, sometimes even longer. As if that wasn't bad enough, there was a word of the day on the blackboard every morning. And if you gave yourself a day off and didn't write it down and look it up and learn the definition, sooner or later, Mrs. Granger would find out. And then, just for you, there would be 2 words of the day for a whole week. It's a picture of Mrs. Granger. She looks pretty mean. Mrs. Granger kept a full set of 30 dictionaries on a shelf at the back of the room. But her pride and joy was one of those huge dictionaries with every word in the whole universe in it. The kind of book that takes 2 kids to carry it. It sat on its own table at the front of her classroom. Every graduate of Lincoln Elementary School for the past 35 years could remember standing at that table and listening to Mrs. Granger's battle cry, "Look it up! That's why we have a dictionary." Even before the school year started, when it was still the summer before 5th grade for Nick and his friends, Mrs. Granger was already busy. Every parent of every new 5th grader got a letter from her. Nick's mom read part of the letter out loud during dinner one night in August. Every home is expected to have a good dictionary in it so every student can do his or her homework properly. And then there was a list of the dictionaries Mrs. Granger thought would be acceptable for home study. Mrs. Allen said, "It's nice to see a teacher who takes her work this seriously." Nick groaned and tried to enjoy the rest of his hamburger, but even watermelon for dessert didn't cheer him up. Nick had no particular use for this dictionary. He liked words a lot, and he was good at using them, but he figured he got all the words he needed by reading, and he read all the time. When Nick ran into a word he didn't know, he'd just ask his brother or his dad or whoever was handy what it meant, and if they knew it, they'd tell him, but not Mrs. Granger. He had heard all about her, and he had seen the fifth graders in the library last year, noses stuck in their dictionaries, frantically trying to finish their vocabulary sheets before English class. It was still a week before school, and Nick already felt like the fifth grade was going to be a very long year. That's the end of chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Miss you all.